Hello, Race Forward listeners. This is Hendeleva, Manager of Podcast and Audio Initiatives, and welcome to Momentum, a Race Forward podcast. Today's bonus episode is presented by GARE, the Government Alliance for Race and Equity. GARE is a dynamic peer-to-peer learning and practice network dedicated to advancing racial equity in government. At the beginning of the month, GARE hosted its annual 2023 membership meeting, which brought together people working in government focused on the themes of how federal, state, and local governments are collaborating with communities to achieve racial equity and the value of being race explicit in an era where the language of DEI is increasingly race agnostic. In this episode, you'll hear part of the conversation between Cecilia Olusola Tribble, GARE's Director of Innovative Practice, and our keynote speaker, visionary writer, musician, and podcaster, and author of the critically acclaimed book, Emergent Strategy, Adrienne Maree Brown. Here's their conversation.
Good afternoon, good morning for some of us. Hi, I'm Cecilia Olusola Tribble, Olusola Conversationally. I am the Director of Innovative Practice here at Government Alliance for Race and Equity at Race Forward. I'm so excited to be in conversation with Adrienne Maree Brown and to get to introduce her. Adrienne Maree Brown grows healing ideas in public through her multi-genre writing, her music, and her podcasts. Informed by 25 years of movement, facilitation, somatics, Octavia Butler scholarship, and her work as a doula, Adrienne has nurtured emergent strategy, pleasure activism, radical imagination, and transformative justice as ideas and practices for transformation. She is the author and editor of several published texts, co-generator of a tarot card deck, and a developing musical ritual.
Hi. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad to be here with you and with all of you. Thank you so much for being here with me.
Also, Emergent Strategy. So moving to that book.
Yeah.
Emergent Strategy, which I know that a lot of folks on the call read and use to help them in their visualizing, normalizing, organizing, and operationalizing in local government. There is a diagram in Emergent Strategy that sets a framework in conversation with a piece from, I believe it's Parable of the Sower. And Parable of the Sower is a book by Octavia Butler for our audience. I'm curious about how would you encourage us to build in that work, and particularly in, I say dynamic partnerships, but partnerships that are mutually beneficial and that sort of moral center that you're talking about. Like, we know that we are here for the greater good of our city, our state, our county. We know that we're here to hopefully center the folks who are getting the least. How do we center those?
I love that. I think one of the core pieces for me is Octavia Butler understood that change is constant, change is inevitable, and that those who are able to succeed at accumulating power, accumulating collective power, accumulating a collective capacity to survive, are the people who are willing to get in right relationship with change, which means I'm not a victim of change. I'm not a silent witness to change. I am someone who is shaping change. So I think when you put that hat on and you go out to the world with that hat of like, I'm here to, I understand that adaptation is going to happen and I'm here to make it intentionally move towards justice, move towards liberation. And it's actually so many small moves that have to do that in order for the large moves to happen. I'm going to read the Octavia Butler quote and mine, because I think this is the page you're talking about. So Octavia Butler said, and it's inside of something called Earth Seed, which is a whole belief system that her protagonist, Lauren, has developed. And it's the fundamental aspect of it is Earthseed says the destiny of humans is to take root amongst the stars, right? That Earth is kind of a place for us to grow how we be with each other. And then we're supposed to go beyond that. And she says, all successful life is adaptable, opportunistic, tenacious, interconnected, and fecund. Understand this, use it, shape God. And when she speaks of God, she speaks of God as the force of change itself, right? The thing that is always changing, the divine capacity we have to change, which I love. So when I read this, and I mean, I really have taken it to heart, I really internalized this. All successful life is adaptable. We have to think of how we're building our institutions, not to do the same thing over and over again, but to build the kind of relationships that will allow us to adapt to changing conditions. Every single institute on earth right now, to me, part of what we need to be thinking about is our climate is changing very rapidly. All of the conditions by which we relate to land, relate to weather, relate to resources, every single aspect of that is going to change for our people. And it's happening much faster than anyone ever thought it would. Except for Octavia, she knew it was going to be really fast. But if you pay attention to the timing and the details and the pace, and even if you pay attention to walking outside and how the weather feels, you can already feel in your system that this change is happening. So if you're building institutions right now, how are they institutions that help people think about being in community, think about being part of sharing resources with each other, sharing safety mechanisms with each other? Because the reality is probably a lot of us are going to have to become fairly migratory over the next 100 years, right? We're going to have to be thinking of community in a different way than we have. I think the American model is like there's a town square and there's a town bureaucracy and there's a local governance and everything stays here. But actually what's unfolding for many of us is there's a flood, there's a hurricane, there's a drought, there's a wildfire, there's a war over resources, there's a mass influx of folks who've become climate refugees. So that's one of the things that I'm like, how are you preparing your institutions to be able to adapt? How are you thinking about the opportunities? So this piece about being opportunistic, the way I internalize that as being nonlinear and iterative, like understanding that like it's not going to be a linear path, but if you are iterating, if you're practicing all the time, turning towards each other, deepening into relationship, being honest and accountable, managing conflict well. If you're iterating all of those things, then when the moments come and the openings happen, you can quickly move. So again, nobody expected what happened on October 7th. Inside of the devastation of grieving for what's happening, grieving for what happened to the Israeli folks, grieving for what's happening to the Palestinian folks, inside of that grief, we were quickly able to mobilize and into the opening because there are so many people who were like, we've already been building relationship. Now there's a massive opening. Let's move into it and talk about how do we actually not just open the door for talking about Palestinian genocide, but now people are like, also, this thing's happening in the Congo. Also, here's something that's happening in Haiti. Here's what the Armenian people are going through. Here's what's happening in the Sudan. It's really, to me, it's really like we're starting to see ourselves as an interconnected species. There are going to be openings that are actually openings for all of us. As a local governance, as a local governing body, you actually get to be a part of that. How does your local community get to be a part of those openings and say, this is a moment when we're going to take a stand? Like really thinking of our local community all the way connected to the local communities and other places because we're all facing actually pretty similar crises, right? And we will be. There's also, for me, this piece around fecundity, which is basically talking about the abundance that is all around us. One of the great myths, modern myths, is that there's not enough. And so we have to be stingy, we have to hoard, we have to dominate what is there because there's just no way that there could ever be enough. And for me, I see the opposite being true in the universe. When I go outside, when I look at my garden beds, the nature of our universe is fecund. The nature of our universe is abundant, is fertile. It can grow anything. And even now, even after so many bombs have been dropped and guns have been shot and so much harm has been done, so many oil spills, our Earth is actually the most resilient planet that we know of. It is incredible. It's incredible how it can recover. So if you understand that, I think that also shifts how we build institutions. Instead of coming from a place of we're in a scarce world and we're having to eke out resources, how do we actually lean into we're in an abundant world and we have to figure out how to share the resources. We have to figure out how to, right, let everyone access.
If you could drop again the definition of fecund for our audience and also the way in which you're using it.
So it's the way Octavia used it. So she said that the all successful life is fecund, and it's basically the capacity of the earth to generate abundance and growth. So it's like if you go into a jungle, if you go into the forest and you lift up a rock, underneath it, there's going to be a billion life forms. There's like so much happening down there. There's constantly so much growth. And anywhere you put in a seed, you throw a seed, the earth is like, I will grow a universe from this seed. That's the kind of earth we live on. She's so dope. I mean, we really live on the most amazing. I was such a, I was just, I had friends over for a game night last night. Some of my Palestinian friends, some other folks come over because we're like, we just need a little joy. We need a little like laughter with each other in this moment. And we were laughing about how basically it's like we live on this earth that is so amazing. And do we even go outside? Do we even like step out? And do we understand that like actually if you put a seed in the ground, you're gonna grow too much? Almost everyone I know who like starts farming or starts doing it's like as soon as the stuff takes off, it's like it's so ripe. Like the world is ripe. And we're the ones who are out of alignment with that. And I'm always saying, I hope that we earn our place on this earth. To me, we live on a fecund earth, but we're not acting according to the natural abundance of resource that she gives us. And, I think we'll either figure that out or she'll shake us off. Maybe this is as morbid as I get, or as when my despair kicks in, it is, I don't think all of us are going to get there, wherever there is on the other side of this. And I think that's because so many people reject the blessing of the earth. They reject the ripeness, the richness of the earth, and they reject the wisdom that comes from the indigenous leaders who still know and still have a deep connection, a direct connection to the land. So I think that we're missing out right now on opportunities that would ensure that the maximum amount of us actually had a future here. And so this is part of why I always tell people things are not getting worse, they're getting uncovered. And we have to hold each other tight and keep pulling back the veil. Because when it seems like these moments are of a crisis, it's like, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. It's like, this has been happening. Injustice is happening all the time. It's happening all the time. What we're trying to do now is say, you can't hide it anymore. We're putting everything in the light, and then we're going to figure out how to take responsibility for ourselves and our communities and our future, right? And I love that position. To me, that feels like a very powerful position to be amongst people saying, we're going to take responsibility for what happens. That doesn't mean we have all the answers, but we are going to do experiments to help ourselves learn how to be in right relationship with our planet and right relationship with each other.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm going to skip around a little bit and kind of stay here in a sense of relationship, relationality, mutuality. GARE, Governmental Alliance for Race and Equity, it is a network of equity practitioners embedded in government that are seeking to make transformational change, right, at the local level. If you could talk to us a bit more about why network is so important and what we can do. We are a network, a nationwide network of people in small and big places. Talk to us about why network is important and how it can both help us live into the work where we are locally, but how we can also empower other folks.
Um, I think that network is the fundamental structure of the universe. I think everything that is thriving is in networked relationships. So I think the thing that humans have gotten a little confused on is that we have isolated ourselves and we have leaned into independence. I can do it myself. I'm going to pull myself up, me, myself, and I. That's all I got in the end. I love Beyonce, but she even has networks on networks on networks that make her work magical, right? And any successful person you see has a strong network in and around and supporting them. If they don't, it doesn't last for long, right? Network is how we actually sustain ourselves through changing conditions. And right now, and maybe this I think I understood this more coming through the pandemic, that if we don't have networks of people that we are thinking together with about how we change, then it's easy for us to slip into an isolation that makes it feel like nothing can change. It makes it feel like we don't have enough. And I watched that happen during the pandemic where people are like, I don't have a way to survive. I don't have a way to make livelihood. My work is not considered essential. I saw people getting laid off. I saw people who were so alone. And I was just like, we need each other so much. I think when we're in these governmental relationships, a lot of what happens is we can be the only one, or we can feel like the only one, the only Black person, or the only person who's talking about white supremacy, or the only one who's talking about and trying to change the way we have relationships on race, or how our budget reflects a different value around race and power dynamics, and not having some places, that we write off, and we're just like, they're just going to be poor, or they're just going to get lower quality services. We can start to pay attention. And if we feel like we're the only one, it can be really difficult to think that that's going to happen. Network is how we get to be in touch with other people who are also trying the same experiments, and where we can learn about what other people have done. So this is why I always uplift. I think of myself as a trench runner sometimes, that I'm like, I'm like, we're out here, but let me run for, they did this over here. It worked. And trying to tell people, I'm like, this senator stepping forward, that creates a pathway for other senators to step forward. Whoever goes first creates a pathway and opening behind them for other people. I also want to name the power of being experimental inside of a networked space. A lot of times, the first time we're doing something, we're not going to do it right. We're rarely, if ever, going to do it perfect. And I say that as a Virgo sun. I'm always trying to do everything perfect, right? It doesn't happen. It's not possible. But what we can do is be experimental, and I'm talking about the scientific method. Like, I have a hypothesis for how I think I can change something in my community. Here's what I'm going to try and what I think the results will be. I'm trying it. Here's what happened. Here's what worked. Here's what didn't work. Here's the next hypothesis. I'm going to take these parts that worked. I'm going to grow that. I'm going to course correct for these things that didn't work. Let's try it again. And when you're in a community of people where you can communicate, hey, I'm trying out this. So, y'all have been working with Janine De Novais, who's one of my very best friends, and she has the Brave Community Method. And it's like, I'm lit up about the Brave Community Method, and I'm telling everyone everywhere, you have to read this book. You have to try this methodology, because it's something that I know works, because she experimented with it for 10 years. And we see the results of, wow, in her classrooms, people can talk about race in an informed way. They can make mistakes. They can put their feet all the way in their mouth, and they don't get removed from the community. They have people who are like, let me help you get your foot back on the ground and root you into justice. Let me help you understand a different way of moving. Now, to me, the fact that Janine and I have been in network, in relationship with each other for 20 years, means that both of us are informing each other's work and experiments. And I have so many other friends and comrades like that I'm like, I'm experimenting with this in the movement world. And I have friends who are like, well, we're experimenting with it in the theater world. We're experimenting with it in the governance world. We're experimenting with it in the funder world. But it's the same experiment that's happening basically everywhere, which is, how do we come together to be an effective force of change within this space that we're occupying? How do we not start from scratch? Because we're not starting from scratch. There's tons and tons of work behind us trying to create these shifts. How do we share with each other the things that have already worked, so that we can start from okay, here we go. Now let's advance. Let's kick the ball down the field. One of my Aikido teachers said that it's like, we're always just trying to move the ball down the field. In our lifetimes, we want to make it end in a different place than we started. Also fun, like, network should be a place of enjoying each other's humanity, getting to be like, y'all, I broke up with that person. Y'all, I graduated from this course. Y'all, we just had a brave conversation in my workplace, and I'm really proud about it. And I want to celebrate that. Like, having a network is a place where people, one of the terms I have used is coevolution through friendship, one of the things that we're ultimately trying to do is grow together. And for me, network is the place where I can go and say, hey, I need to be vulnerable about this. I tried something and it didn't go that well. Can you hold me in that? Here's what I learned. Maybe my ego made me think I was going to solve racism, whatever it was. And then network helps you to be resilient. You made that mistake on behalf of the whole species. Thank you. Let's learn from it. It's never a failure. It's just a lesson. So let's learn from it and let's keep moving. And the network also allows us to rest. Maybe that's the last piece I'll add. Because I'm in network, this past, oh my gosh, 3, almost 4 weeks now, if I didn't have a network, I don't know if I would just be completely burnt out and completely zapped. I wouldn't be sleeping. I wouldn't be drinking water. That's how I respond to crisis. My network has been like, Adrienne, we see what you just did. We see the risk you just took. We see you speaking out. Go to bed. Did a good job. You did enough today. You did as much as you could do. Drink a bottle of water. I even have friends who be like, girl, your skin looks a little dry. Okay. And you look cute, but your skin, like I have people like that who just like, the network is also where care can flow between us. Because I keep telling all the people that I'm in this with, I'm like, we're in solidarity work for the long haul. We're in justice work for our whole lives. We're not going anywhere. So staggering is possible when you're in a network. You're like, I'm not always on the front. I'm not always the first goose. Sometimes I'm back on the tip.
And I mean, and if for nothing else, there's a psychological rest that you get that you're able to tap into when you know that you're not alone, when you know that you're not the only one holding things up. There are things holding you up. There are folks holding you up, holding you up.
Yeah, and like I know that maybe none of y'all know what I mean, but microaggressions are violent. And sometimes in network, you just need to be able to turn to someone and be like, I need to cry about how it felt to receive this. I need to cry in a safe place. I need to feel this. I need to vent my anger about this so that I can go back in and keep fighting. But if you don't have any place to release, you just can hold all of that inside your one being. A network allows it to flow and flow and flow until it can actually rest down.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Absolutely.
They're not micro.
Well, they're not micro.
Aggressions and violence. Yes.
They are. I think that I'll say that the person who coined micro is trying to speak to the fact that they happen all the time.
That's right. That's right. Well, I think it is. Yeah, I think that there's a way that I try to hold. I'm like, someone saying something to me versus someone dropping a bomb on my house. They're different. Yeah, we do have to acknowledge like these things are different, but because they're rooted in the same place, we can feel what's dropping on us in those small moments. And I feel like with network is often the place where you can be like, oh my God, I got you.
Yeah. I mean, microaggressions have a way of making you feel crazy.
Yes.
And that's exactly what white supremacy was supposed to do. And the network is like, no, that happened and it was messed up. I would love for you to talk to us about your methodology for speculation.
I love that you asked me about this. It's one of my favorite things to do I do a few different methods. One of them, which I think is most useful maybe for the work y'all are doing, is collaborative ideation. So having people vision and dream together and sometimes literally write science fiction, really write what is a core, we have a worksheet I can probably get you a copy of, but what is a core issue that's happening in your community that needs the medicine of your imagination? And if it's water, if it's education, or if it's a couple of different things, taking yourself into a future, taking yourself to 2067 and being able to say, can we imagine ourselves having resolved this or shifted this in such a way that we were resting in the abundance of it? We were resting in possibility. And that exercise, so that when you're starting to do the work, you're moving towards your vision. If you're not, the thing I always warn people about is, and if you've heard me speak before, you may have heard this because I really deeply believe this, and so it comes out a lot, is we are living inside of other people's imaginations. We live in other people's constructs that they imagined. They often imagine themselves supreme inside of. And I feel like a nightmare when you are living inside of someone else's dream. And so what we're trying to do is reclaim, right? Because colonization, enslavement, capitalism, all of these large oppressive systems, part of what they're taking from us is our imagination or our belief that we have the right to imagine our lives and live into something. Reclamation, right? It's like we do have the right to imagine something different in this community and imagine something different for our world. And then let that imagination guide the policy work. Let that guide, because I also say this, we have to go from where we are to this future place. Articulating the future place and working backward, to me, is one of the ways I can understand how we get there. If I want to, for instance, live in a place where water is clean and abundant and everyone has access to it, how can I imagine what the structures of that world would look like? How is water cared for? How do we track it? Who's testing it? Who's in charge of that piece? It's not just magical water fairies, unless that's what you imagined, right? And you're going to figure out how to make them. But for most of us, there's a system of governance that would help all of us have access to it. So then we can start to build a bridge back from where we are now. What would have to change in us and in our policy for that reality to become possible? And then the organizing can begin. There's the culture shifting that has to happen. I think when you see policies that don't actually seem to have effect, it's because you haven't shifted the culture that underrides that. I also think that there's a piece around who gets to do the imagining. And I feel like as a body of government, I think doing sessions where it's like, come imagine the future of this place with us, and really looking at how do the kids get to play a part in that? How do the parents get to play a part in that? How do people who have been incarcerated and are incarcerated get to play a part in that? How do folks who are working at minimum wage or less or living wage, like, how do you talk to people across the class spectrum about their visions for the future of this place? How do you speak to the unhoused about their vision? What does it look like to have people coming in and be like, what would it look like if it worked for you? Sometimes people can't tap into imagination. That's why I use the words collaborative ideation, because I'm like, we're just going to think together. That's all that means. Those big words, lots of syllables, but really what we're going to do is think together, dream together. And that question of, can you imagine if it worked for you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love that.
Thank you for joining us for this special bonus episode of Momentum, a Race Forward podcast. We want to send a big thank you to Adrienne Marie Brown and her team, Cecilia Olusola, and the Government Alliance for Race and Equity team. Make sure to follow Race Forward on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter/X. And to support our work, make a donation by texting RFPOD to 4432. That's RFPOD to 4432. Until next time, let's keep the momentum going.